They said she came into town barefoot. Her hair was the color of dried blood, tangled and loose, falling in snarls down her back. Her dress, once cream, bore the same dust that clung to her skin. Earth turned to shame. She didn't speak as she walked, didn't beg or barter, just drifted like smoke through the main road of Gallows End, the sun baking blisters onto her bare shoulders. No luggage, no kin, no name. They gave her one by nightfall. Scarlet Willa, a name meant to be spoken behind cupped hands and through the mouths of men who smelled like sweat and regret. The saloon lights bled out over the street as evening fell. Lanterns flickering like the stars had come down just to witness her undoing. Reverend Durney, no real reverend at all, watched her from the doorway of the Rattlesnake Bell, hands clasped like a man at prayer, but eyes glinting with profit. "Poor thing," murmured Nora Millstone, the laundry widow who lived by the creek and cleaned the saloon girls' dresses when they stained. "Won't last the week." Willa didn't cry when Durney offered her food. She didn't cry when he said, with a sugar voice, "Better here than starving under the sky, sweetheart." And she didn't cry when he told her she'd earn her keep the way pretty girls did, by wearing rouge in silence. She only looked at the bowl of stew, hands still, and asked, "Do I get a room?" He gave her one with peeling wallpaper and a cracked mirror. It didn't have a lock. She slept with the chair pressed under the handle and a Bible under her pillow, a worn thing from her father's saddlebag. He died with pennies in his eyes and debts that sold her freedom for a few silver coins. In the mornings, Willa swept. In the evenings, she was told to smile. Durney didn't make her lie with the men at first. Not right away. He was a businessman, knew value needed mystery. She'd serve drinks, sing soft if asked, touch a wrist, let the hungry think they were wanted. Her voice broke the first time she tried to sing. She chose him. Couldn't help it. Muscle memory. Something about the old rugged cross, and how mercy bled from the wood. A few of the girls stopped to listen. The piano man, tired and half-drunk, fumbled to follow her tune. But when she hit the last note, soft as ash, a laugh broke the silence. Not cruel, just startled. It came from the corner booth, shadowed and low. A man with a limp and a scar along his chin, nursing a glass he hadn't touched in half an hour. Silas Rourke, rancher, widower, rumored to be barely holding on. He didn't speak to her that night. Didn't even look again. Just paid for his drink and walked out into the dark, slow as a man walking through water. The next day, town whispered louder. Willa Grace, the preacher's girl from Dust Hollow, was working the bell now, wearing rouge, serving sinners. One woman said she'd once braided Willa's hair in church. Another swore she'd seen her feed a baby bird fallen from a nest. All agreed on one thing. The girl had fallen too far to rise again. Willa said nothing. She took their stares like wind on a tired tree. Let them look. Let them name her. But inside, the memory of who she'd been scratched like mice in a cupboard. Never enough to scream, but too loud to ignore. One morning, as frost still hung to the troughs, Willa came down early to scrub the floor. Her hands ached. The splinters bit. But the silence was her own, and she hummed a tune her mother once sang while shelling peas. That's when she saw him again. Silas, outside the window, speaking to Nora, who stood with a basket of wet clothes at her hip. His boy, Eli, they called him, clung to his coat, peering through the gaps in the porch rail. Willa ducked instinctively, heart thudding. She didn't want them to see her like this, dirty, knelt on the saloon floor, smelling of old whiskey and lemon soap. But the boy saw her, and he waved. She hadn't been waved at in months. It undid her more than she wanted. Later that week, she passed them on the street. Silas was limping worse than usual, shoulders hunched like he expected the sky to fall. Willa carried a basket of glassware to the back shed. They didn't speak, but Eli turned as they walked past and slipped a plum into her basket. A tiny thing, soft and bruised, but sweet-smelling. She found herself crying over it hours later. That night, Durney made her wear the red dress. Said a trader from Tucson wanted fresh company. Said smiling wouldn't be enough anymore. Willa bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood, nodded, and took the stairs. But the man was mean. Not cruel, not yet, but the kind who didn't see women as real. Called her darlin' like a curse. Gripped too hard when she poured his drink. Asked if her hair was red everywhere. She laughed once, cold and clean. He didn't like that. Silas was at the bar again. Same corner. Same untouched drink. He watched the man watching her. His jaw ticked once. Then he looked away. Again. The traitor didn't go upstairs. Gurney said they'd build up to it. Said Willa needed time to get seasoned. She asked what that meant. He only smirked. Outside, the wind rose, kicking dust across the porch. She sat there long after the crowd thinned, arms around her knees, watching the stars blur above the mountains. You know, said Nora, settling beside her, the sky don't care what they call you. Willa turned, eyes heavy. Long as you don't start believing it, Nora added. I don't know who I am anymore. That's fine, Nora said. Let the next name be one you choose. The next evening, Willa sang again. Not a hymn this time. Something low and winding, like creek water curling through cottonwoods. Her voice steadied. The saloon quieted. Even Gurney stopped wiping his glass. And Silas, he didn't smile. But this time, when he stood to leave, he looked right at her. Willa held his gaze for a breath too long. Enough for her pulse to jump. Then he turned, walked out into the cold. Back in her room, she pressed her hand to the Bible beneath her pillow. Didn't open it. Just held it there like a heartbeat. The mirror caught her reflection. Face clean, hair brushed, eyes too old for 22. She touched her own cheek gently, as if reminding herself it was still there. Outside, a gust slammed the shutters. The candle flickered. Downstairs, the piano resumed, clumsy and warm. Willa lay down and whispered a name only she knew. The one her mother used before the world began carving her into something else. She fell asleep with that name in her mouth. And for the first time since arriving in Gallows End, she didn't dream of running. The morning wind tugged at the porch slats of the Rourke homestead, slipping through broken boards like a thief in church. Silas Rourke stood in the doorway, mug in hand, watching frost melt off the ridge. He hadn't slept more than a few hours, not since the night his wife died 3 winters ago, with his son curled up by the fire and the doctor arriving too late. He used to laugh, back when the house smelled like bread and his wife's humming filled the silence. Now it smelled like old wood, hoarse sweat, and forgetting. Inside, Eli stirred beneath a quilt his mother stitched, one patch missing. She died before she could finish it. Silas didn't mend it. Couldn't. That empty square hurt more than the limp he walked with. By noon, they were in town. Grain prices too high, feed too low. Silas bartered what he could, paid for what he couldn't. He didn't speak unless asked. Eli trailed behind, quiet as breath. The boy had learned young that his father's silence wasn't anger. It was sorrow too wide for words. As they passed the Rattlesnake Bell, Eli looked toward the saloon window. Willa was outside, brushing down a skittish roan tied to the post. Her hair was braided today, not curled or painted, just pulled back in a thick rope, wild strands catching in the wind. She whispered to the horse, palm flat, eyes gentle. She didn't see them watching. Silas hesitated. The image hit something raw in him. Not desire, not pity, something older. Like recognition. Then he turned away, nodding for Eli to keep walking. The saloon remained the town's heart, a foul and pumping one. Women on the boardwalk wore scowls or smirks. Men carried rumors like guns. They said Willa was softening Gurney's edges, making money, taking the better rooms. Some said she chose her clients now. Others said Silas had his eye on her, and shame on him, a widower with a son. He didn't correct them. Let the town speak. That evening, Silas patched a fence alone. Eli watched from the porch, book in hand, but not reading. A hawk wheeled overhead, and the grass moved like water beneath it. The quiet pressed in. "Daddy," Eli said finally, "do you think people stay the way they are?" Silas straightened, leaned on the post. "What do you mean?" "Like if they're broken or bad, can they still change?" The question hit harder than Eli knew. Silas knelt, pulled his boy close. "Everything changes," he said. "Even stone. It just takes time." The next day, trouble came in fine clothes. A silver-toothed trader from New Mexico stopped into town with gold to spend and questions to ask. Asked about red-haired girls. Said he wanted something worth the trip. Reverend Durney smiled, his kind of smile. Called Willa down that evening. She wore the red dress. The one that clung and shimmered and wasn't meant for breathing. Her steps down the stairs were slow. Her eyes were blank. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't look for mercy. She simply stopped at Durney's gesture and took the trader's arm. They played cards for an hour. He laughed too loud, touched her back too long. She never winced, never flinched, just folded into herself like someone trying to disappear without leaving. Silas was there, not to drink, not even to watch. He didn't know why he came anymore, only that some quiet part of him wouldn't let her stand alone under all that watching. He sat in the shadows, limp sharper than usual, hands unmoving. Willa saw him, not with her eyes, but with that sixth sense women get when men are near and dangerous, or near and silent and not dangerous. She met his gaze for a split second when the trader leaned too close, and her spine straightened. Barely, but it was enough. Later, when the man left with a scowl, offended, somehow, that Willa hadn't flattered him more, Durney hissed something sharp at her. She said nothing, only walked upstairs and didn't come down until dawn. Silas didn't sleep. That morning, as he hammered the warped edge of the barn door, Eli ran toward him from town, dirt on his boots and something urgent in his step. "She got hit, Daddy," the boy said. "Miss Willa." Silas froze. "Who told you?" "Nora," said Durney, backhanded her. "Over nothing." "She was bleeding," she said. His hands curled around the hammer until his knuckles went white. But he said nothing, just turned toward the house, jaw tight. That night, Willa didn't sing. She sat in the alley behind the saloon, dress torn slightly at the hem, dabbing at her lip with a cloth Nora had soaked in salt water. Her eyes were glassy but dry. She didn't cry, didn't even speak. Nora sat beside her, murmuring soft things that didn't need answers. "I'd kill him," Nora said, "if it'd change anything." But it wouldn't. Willa finally spoke. "It's just skin." "No, sweetheart. It's what's under it that worries me." Silas didn't approach her, but he saw the bruise, saw the way she kept her chin up when townsfolk whispered, saw how she walked slower now, shoulders pulled in like armor. The next day, he left a folded blanket on the saloon steps. No note, no explanation, just wool, thick and clean, smelling faintly of smoke and cedar. Willa found it before noon, held it for a long time, then folded it again and carried it upstairs like it weighed more than it did. 2 nights later, rain fell like grief. The saloon roof leaked. Willa stood near the open door, watching lightning crack above the far ridge. Her eyes searched the night. She didn't say what she was looking for. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps something that had yet to come. Eli passed her with a bucket, hurrying to bring water in from the pump. He stopped. "Do you like stories?" he asked. She looked down. "Used to. My mama did too." Then he reached into his coat and handed her a crumpled paper, his own drawing. A girl and a horse under stars. Simple, honest lines. She touched the page like it might vanish. "Thank you," she said, voice raw. He nodded, like a man, then ran off into the dark. Later that night, Silas returned home to find Willa's drawing pinned above Eli's bed. The boy was asleep, breathing deep. The drawing fluttered faintly in the breeze. Silas stood there for a long time. In the morning, Willa came down early again. The saloon was quiet, most of the men still sleeping off bad liquor and worse dreams. She stepped outside, into the damp chill, the blanket around her shoulders. Across the street, Silas hitched his wagon. Didn't look her way. Until he did. And when he did, he nodded once. Simple. Honest. Enough. She didn't smile. But she nodded back. And in that sliver of silence, something shifted. Not loudly. Not even visibly. But like snow softening a rooftop, weight building, quietly inevitable. That evening, when the piano man asked what song she wanted, she chose a lullaby. Not one for children, but one her mother sang when storms rattled the walls and her father paced the room with worry in his hands. Her voice was steadier now. Outside, Silas listened from the porch. He didn't go inside. Not yet. But he stayed until the last note faded. And Willa, without knowing he was there, sang as if someone was. Rain came just after dusk, sweeping down from the hills with the smell of wet mesquite and something electric, like a promise waiting to be broken. It pattered against the windows of the Rattlesnake Bell, where the girls lit candles and pulled shawls tighter around bare shoulders. Inside, laughter rang false, the piano thudded out a tired waltz, and Willa sat quietly at the edge of the bar, her eyes fixed on the door that never opened when she needed it to. The kerosene lantern above her flickered, casting her face in amber and shadow. She looked tired in a different way now. Not the raw, bruised weariness of arrival, but the hollowed endurance of someone learning to live without hoping too much. Her hair was dry but uncombed, her dress modest, and beneath the table, her hands traced the hem over and over, like it might unravel into something else if she wished it hard enough. Across town, Silas Rourke lit a single flame inside his sodden barn. The fire had started low, a twist of cloth soaked in oil, wedged beneath the feed sacks. It hadn't spread far before he caught it, but the damage was done. 3 hens dead, 1 goat limping, the grain ruined. Eli had screamed when the smoke came. Silas dragged him out in the dark, his own hands blistered from the heat, boots soaked in mud. The boy cried for the animals. Silas said nothing. He stood in the ruin, chest heaving, heart pounding with something older than anger. He didn't name names aloud, but he thought of the whispers, of the rancher who'd watched him walk out with Willa's gaze trailing after, of the men who'd laughed when he didn't fight back, of Durney, smiling with too many teeth. The town had never needed facts to believe the worst. By morning, the clouds still hung low. Silas sat on the porch, knuckles raw, while Eli packed dry goods into jars, hands shaking. No one had come to help. No one ever did. But someone knocked at the door just after noon. It was Willa. She didn't speak at first, just held out a wrapped cloth, bread, still warm, with bits of honey crusted on the edge. Her eyes moved to Eli, who watched from behind the table, then back to Silas. "I heard," she said. He nodded once, took the bread. "Thank you." She turned to go, but paused. "I could help. Patch the coop. Feed the goat." His eyes searched hers, quiet and unreadable. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know." Then she walked away, feet squelching in the mud, dress hem soaked. He watched her go until she turned the bend and vanished into rain. That night, Willa sat upstairs in her room, candle burning low. She wrote letters to no one, small notes folded into scraps, slid into cracks behind the wallpaper. She'd started weeks ago, one each night. They said things like "you are not what they say," and "one day you will not flinch when someone is kind." Sometimes she didn't sign them. Other times she signed them Grace, because that was her middle name, and she missed how it sounded. Below, Nora scrubbed the parlor floors. The place stank of spilled whiskey and damp cigars. When Willa came down to help, Nora just handed her a rag and nodded toward the piano. "They say the bell was a church once," Willa said, voice low. "Before my time. But you can still feel it, can't you? Like someone's watching." "Not God, I hope." Nora laughed without smiling. "Maybe just ghosts." Later, after the floor dried and the saloon felt quiet, Willa slipped outside. Rain had slowed to a mist, clinging to her skin. She stood barefoot on the porch and watched water run down the barrels. Her fingers itched for something: piano keys, a pen, someone's hand. She didn't hear Silas approach until he was nearly beside her. He didn't say her name, just stood there, coat heavy with rain, hat dripping. "They say it was Durney's boys," Willa murmured. "I know. You gonna tell the sheriff?" "No point. Sheriff plays cards with Durney twice a week." They stood in silence, listening to thunder roll over the hills. Willa turned to face him, brow creased. "I'm sorry. I know it's cause of me." His jaw tightened. "It's not your fault. They think I'm yours." His eyes met hers then, something fierce and aching in them. "You're not a thing to be owned." She looked away. "But I am something they can ruin." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded slip of paper. Eli drew this. Said it was you and the filly. Willa unfolded it slowly. Stick figures beneath a crooked sun. A girl brushing a horse, its mane wild, its eye too large. She smiled soft and sad. He's got the heart of a poet. He sees people, Silas said, even when they try to disappear. They didn't speak again, but he left the paper with her, and she stood on the porch long after he'd gone, thumb brushing over the edge like it was something holy. The next morning, the saloon awoke to new gossip. A writer had seen Silas and Willa speaking outside the bell. Close. Too close. Some said she kissed his hand. Others swore he kissed hers. None of it was true, but truth was never the point. That evening, a drunk rancher cornered Willa in the hallway, grabbed her arm too tight, called her Silas's whore and something worse. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just pushed him back with both palms, hard enough to make him stumble. Durney came running, not to help, to yell. You think you're better now, he hissed. Too good to serve. I didn't touch him, she said. You're here to be touched. She stood still, shaking. Her lip bled where her teeth had caught skin. Nora stepped between them. Let her be. Durney sneered. She walks like a wife now. Ain't no place in here for saints. That night, Willa didn't go upstairs. She walked the long way out of town, past the creek, past the fence line near Silas's land. She didn't know where she was headed until she saw the barn light glowing warm through the mist. He was inside, mending a harness. Eli slept on a pile of hay, mouth slightly open, clutching a blanket Willa had left on the porch 2 weeks ago. Silas didn't speak when he saw her. She stepped inside, shoes soaked, hair plastered to her temples. I don't want to stay at the bell tonight, she said. He nodded once. You can take the cot in the back. She looked at him. I don't mean it that way. I know. He handed her a towel, and she dried her hands, her face. The barn smelled of rain, smoke, and leather. Safe things. When she passed Eli, the boy stirred, looked up. Miss Willa. She knelt beside him. Go back to sleep. Will you be here when I wake? I think so, she whispered. He nodded. Rolled over. She stayed there a moment, watching him breathe, then stood and turned to Silas. I don't want to be saved, she said. I don't want to save you. She stepped closer. What do you want then? He looked at her like a man, remembering how to speak after too long underwater. Someone to stay, he said. She didn't answer. But when he turned away to stoke the fire, she laid the drawing from his son gently on the table beside the lantern and stood very still, letting the heat of the room remind her she was alive. The saloon never smelled right after a storm. The damp clung to the curtains, the floorboards, the velvet wallpaper that once pretended to be fine. It hung heavy in the air that night, soaked with whiskey, sweat, and the sharp stink of kerosene oil. The piano man played something slow and indifferent, the keys echoing like footsteps down a church aisle no one believed in anymore. Willa moved like she'd grown used to pretending. Her dress tonight was pale blue, faded from too many washes, the bodice drawn tight by Durney's insistence that shape sells better than sorrow. Her hair was down, not curled, just brushed and parted, the ends dark from rain that hadn't fully dried. The men at the tables didn't notice the difference. They never did. They only saw what they came for, an outline, a silhouette, a pair of lips pressed into silence. But something in her had changed. It wasn't defiance. Not yet. But it was near. Reverend Durney stood by the stairwell, hand resting on the polished wood rail like it was a throne, and he its king. He was in a good mood, which for him meant his smile looked almost kind. He'd had a profitable week. New faces from out west, new money in his pockets, and a promise of more to come. That night, the rancher from San Angelo returned, broad, red-faced, and full of entitlement. He reeked of cigars and the kind of confidence that came from unchecked cruelty. Durney greeted him like a brother, poured him the best whiskey, then nodded toward Willa. This time, he said, loud enough for her to hear, she's yours for the evening. A reward for your generosity. Willa stood still for one long moment. The room slowed around her. Her hands itched, not with fear, but with something more dangerous, memory. The feeling of sunlight on real linen sheets. Her mother brushing her hair while singing something soft. Eli handing her that plum with dirt still on the skin. Silas offering a blanket without asking questions. A drawing on the table by a sleeping boy. She looked up, met Gurney's gaze, then the rancher's. And she smiled. "All right," she said. "Let me get my shawl." She walked up the stairs slowly, measured, each footstep lighter than the last. She didn't hurry, didn't break. At the top, she paused, glanced down at the room below, and caught Gurney watching her like a crow measuring distance to carrion. In her room, the kerosene lamp was already lit. A red scarf lay on the dresser, one Gurney liked her to wear. She didn't touch it. Instead, she moved to the drawer and pulled out the small paring knife she'd hidden there weeks ago, the blade honed nightly with careful patience. She didn't plan to use it. She didn't want to, but she needed to remember it was there. That choice was still hers. She placed it on the bed, beside the folded blanket Silas had left, still holding his scent. Then she sat and waited. Downstairs, the rancher drank more, boasted louder, told a story about skinning a coyote alive just to watch it squirm. Some men laughed. Others shifted uncomfortably. Gurney only smiled, already counting the coins in his head. The door opened with a gust of wind. At first, no one looked. The piano man kept playing. The laughter droned on. But then the wind didn't stop. It howled in behind the figure standing at the threshold, bending candlelight and pulling smoke from the lamps. Silas Rourke stood there, soaked through, eyes blazing, jaw clenched. He didn't move fast. He didn't have to. He limped and slow, each step heavy with purpose. His coat dripped water. Mud caked his boots. He looked like a man carved out of thunder. The room stilled. Men turned. Gurney stiffened, lips parting, unsure if this was bravado or madness. Silas spoke only once. "She's coming with me." The words didn't shout. They didn't need to. They dropped like iron onto the floorboards, and no one breathed. The rancher stood, dumb with confusion. "Who the hell are you?" Silas didn't answer. He didn't look at the man. He looked up toward the staircase, toward the woman frozen at the top, one hand resting on the banister, the other trembling against her dress. "Willa." She stared down at him, heartbeat in her throat. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. She didn't know if this was real, if this was kindness or foolishness. But then she saw the way he looked at her, not with pity, not with rescue, but recognition. The way a man looks at someone he believes in. And she moved. Down the stairs, one step at a time. Gurney grabbed her wrist halfway down. "You leave with him," he hissed. "You don't come back." Her voice was quiet, steady. "I wasn't planning to." She yanked free, harder than she meant. Gurney stumbled back. The rancher's hand hovered near his belt. "She's paid for." "She's not yours," Silas said. His voice dropped to gravel. "She never was." Someone laughed, sharp with tension. Gurney reached for the pistol he kept under the bar. Silas saw it. So did Willa. But she was faster. Her hand flew to her waist, no blade there, just instinct. But the knife was still in her room. She reached for a bottle instead, flung it across the room. It shattered behind the bar, glass spraying, flames catching on the spilled kerosene from a knocked-over lamp. Suddenly, smoke billowed, screaming. The crowd rushed for the exit. Willa leapt the last 3 stairs and reached Silas's side. He grabbed her hand without looking, and they pushed through the chaos together, into the rain-soaked street, into the cold that felt like salvation. Behind them, the saloon hissed with smoke. The fire didn't catch. The rain saw to that, but the damage was done. By the time Gurney smothered the flames, the girl was gone. Willa didn't speak as they rode. Silas said nothing. The mare beneath them was steady, used to the dark. Eli met them at the door, barefoot, holding a lantern too big for his hands. "Made your bed," he said. Willa blinked. "What?" "In the back room. Wash the sheets." I didn't know if you were really coming." "I didn't either," she whispered. She slept that night without dreams. In the morning, she braided her hair at the sink, wearing a flannel shirt Silas had left folded on the chair. She hummed to herself, a song with no words, and watched mist roll off the hills. Later, she helped Eli feed the goats, her skirt tucked up, boots muddy. He handed her the brush, and she worked in silence, gentle strokes down the animal's spine. Silas watched from the porch, arms crossed. He didn't speak, just watched the way her hands moved, the way her shoulders had stopped caving inward. She met his gaze once, across the distance, and something passed between them, a promise unspoken. The town, of course, buzzed like hornets. They said he'd lost his mind, that he'd thrown away his good name for a saloon girl, that Willa was cursing the land, and that no God-fearing woman would ever speak to them again. But some spoke differently. "She sings when she walks now," said the butcher's wife, "like she don't even realize." "She walks with the boy," said the schoolteacher. "Teaches him poetry, if you can believe it." And one man, drinking beside the store, said, "Maybe she ain't what we thought. Maybe he ain't either." Willa heard none of it. She didn't go to town much. She stayed by the house, planting a garden that hadn't grown in years, pulling weeds, singing to the soil. One evening, as the sky went gold with late spring, she found herself standing on the porch with Eli beside her, both watching the sun sink into the fields. Silas sat in the doorway, a book in hand, unread. "You gonna marry her?" Eli asked suddenly. Silas looked up. "Would you mind?" Eli shrugged. "She smells like soap now, not like the saloon." Silas grinned. Inside, Willa laid the table for three. She lit the lantern herself, adjusted the wick, and watched the glow fill the room. She didn't ask for anything that night. Not a name, not a promise, just a seat at the table, a slice of bread, a place to belong. When the sun vanished and the wind cooled, they ate in quiet. The good kind. The kind that settles deep in the bones. She laughed once, soft and surprised, at something Eli said. Silas smiled like a man remembering how. Later, Willa sat on the porch alone, knees pulled to her chest, breath visible in the air. Maybe she'd always carry pieces of the bell, the ghost of a dress, a room without a lock, a name whispered like a curse. But maybe that wasn't the end. She closed her eyes and leaned back, head against the post, the stars opening like prayers above her. And maybe, just maybe, it was only the beginning. Because love doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it limps. Sometimes it knocks once and waits. Sometimes it kicks open a door, not to rescue, but to see you. And sometimes that's enough to save you, even if you never asked to be saved.